So today, as this is warming up, I'm going to let my two co-presenters introduce themselves.
So I am Marissa, Abeyta, now a third-year doctoral student at San Diego State University in the EDD program there, and my dissertation topic is on formerly incarcerated Latino males in post-secondary education, and I'm focusing on community colleges, specifically the ones in Southern California.
Hi everybody, my name is Fernando Garcia. I'm currently a resident director at Cal State San Marcos, but I did my master's work at San Diego State under Dr. Vasquez, where I got the research bug, and I really loved being accepted into these spaces. So that's why I keep in touch with Dr. Vasquez.
Future doctoral student.
Yeah. I'm actually looking at doctoral programs at the moment, so if you know anybody or say hello, please feel free to find me after this session.
Non-shameless plug. So what we're going to be talking about today is some of the research that it's been an ongoing research project. Actually didn't necessarily start off with this focus on capital. It was a general research study on Latino males and their transfer experiences. So transfer students, and we asked some questions about their pre-transfer experiences or post-transfer experiences. And then some of this data collection is also part of another study that I was ongoing with two of my other colleagues, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez at Iowa State and Dr. Chris Salinas from Florida Atlantic University. And so the three of us, we did a tri-state investigation on Latino male transfer students in California, Texas, and Florida. And so some of the interviews and participants that we used in this study was presented for our data analysis. But that study did focus on masculinity, and so we kind of talked about like, well, what is masculinity, and we kind of talked about our own identities as women, as being Latina. Chris identifies as being a gay Latino male, and so we kind of thought about, how do our personal lenses influence the research that we do? And I get asked a lot, why aren't you doing research on Latinas? You're Latina, and I'm like, well. I think this research really stemmed from my doctoral experiences when I was doing some initial literature review, and I was looking at outcomes for Latino students in community colleges. I thought I was just the worst researcher because I could not find any articles on Latino male community college students, and it was like 2012. I was like, what is going on? So, we reached out to some of these foremost, scholars who are doing research on Latino men, Victor Sainz, Luis Don Juan, and yeah, they're just like, no, we haven't really gone in that area. I'm like, okay, well, this is definitely something that we need to start looking into and asking questions and trying to unpack a little bit more in the work that we do. And so let me continue with my slide. Also, introduction, Fernando, as you can tell. Fernando, you're coming. You're on your picture. So I'm an associate director of a center at San Diego State called the Community College Equity Assessment Lab. Other folks might know it formally as the Minority Male Community College Collaborative. I work with my two colleagues, Dr. Strike Harris and J. Luke Wood. And then this is a part of our research team, but these are the folks who help with this particular data analysis. And then I also want to acknowledge these are our undergraduate students. So it's Fernando and I were talking about earlier, how amazing it is to see what can be done when you introduce undergraduate students and community college students to research, and just to increasing that pipeline from the community college to post-baccalaureate degree attainment. And so I was a community college transfer student myself, and I think that was one thing I felt like I didn't have any experience in was research, and especially in social science research, I felt like a lot of it was geared towards STEM majors, and hard sciences, and so when I became a faculty member, that was just something that I, kind of thought about, well, what can I do now as a professor to start increasing this pipeline again for community college students and Latino students? So these are 4 out of my 5 undergraduate students who started with me when they transferred into San Diego State. 4 of the 5 so far they graduated, and they are going on to grad school, so I'm so excited for them. I'm not crying because I get all emotional. But they're amazing, and I want to acknowledge them because they themselves are also part of this process. And so, I think that's also part of the research. I think, the work that we do, we identify with it, and so we kind of hear the term sometimes me search or I search, for those who are, I was also in Puente, I was a Puentista, so I think that was also part of something that I learned in community college, but for them, I think it was integral for them to be able to do research on Latino male transfer students when they themselves were Latino male transfer students. And so I think part of this process was just empowering for them to just see, to be able to read the literature, and there were times where they just like, yes, that's what I'm experiencing. This is what, this is me, this is how I experience the community college system. So they've been very, this is at AHI, I don't know if everybody goes to AHI, American Association of Hispanics in Higher Education. They presented their research there, and so this is also a part of this process. So, okay, so Latino men in community college, what do we know? I'm not going to spend too much time on data, statistics, because there's a reason why we're studying this population. So while Latino men are more likely to begin their post-secondary education at a community college, they're more likely to depart without completing their academic goals, whether that's degree attainment, certificate transfer. And so I think a big part of the research that we do is we try to focus on this anti-deficit perspective of this population. We already know the data, the statistics of Latino male students not doing well, or being disproportionately impacted from the rest of their peers. And so I think what we also are mindful of is how can we advance our research in a way that's definitely focusing on assets instead of their deficits. And it's not even their deficits. I think we also take this approach of recognizing institutional responsibility. And so I mentioned that to Ariane, so like at what point is it the institution's responsibility to create these systems and these programs and these services that align to, or align with the cultural, just other identities of our students. So until recently, there really has been this dearth in literature on Latino male community college students. And as I was looking it up, I could literally fit almost all of the literature on this slide. I think, and this is specifically on Latino men in community colleges. There's been research that has focused on Latino and Latina students, or Latinx students in general in community colleges. When it comes to identifying those research articles that focus specifically on Latino men and their experiences in community colleges, and this is not the whole list, but there's a lot more. But I think you can see that most of this research has been published within the last 2 or 3 years, right? So there's definitely been this focus on Latino male community college students. There's even fewer students on their experiences as transfer students. So if there's anyone who wants to correct me, I have not found a single, peer-reviewed public article on Latino male transfer students. Specifically on Latino male transfer students. I have not found one. So, if anyone wants to go and publish the first one, please help us so that we can cite you all and expand our research. There's even little focus on their socialization and their masculine identity within this context. So briefly, what we do know of the literature that has been written, most of it has been focused on these kind of 4 general areas. So engagement, folks have found that the more that Latino men work per week, the less likely they are to engage. As Ariane had mentioned earlier, the more that Latino men perceive or have these perceptions of positive help-seeking behaviors, the more likely they are to engage with their faculty and their peers. The more that Latino men feel like they have this healthy competitive ethos, so it's not just like, we hear a lot about pride and machismo, but it's more just like, no, it's this competitive ethos, but they're competing against themselves or against like friends in a healthy and a positive way that adds as a source of motivation. For these non-cognitive outcomes, so a lot of this is quantitative research. Folks have found that the more life stressors, or like the number of stressful life events that Latino men experience, the less likely they are to feel that their degree is worthwhile and they feel that they have less of a control of their education. Also, the more that Latino men feel that their degree is worthwhile for utility, that they feel that they have a control of their education, and the more that they are intrinsically interested in what they're doing and what they're studying, the more likely they are to see school as this as a space that's relevant for both men and women. So typically, when we read research on masculinity and school, we find that school is typically seen as this feminine space, right? There's been research that talks about teachers in K-12 education typically tend to be female, and so it's become this feminized space for Latino men and young boys to not be able to see themselves in a positive way and academically. And then lastly, the more that Latino men are engaged or integrated, both academically and socially on their campuses, the higher their sense of belongingness. And then institutionally, so Latino men who attend suburban colleges have higher graduation rates, but there's been some of the previous research that I cited, they've kind of challenged these ideas of like, well, what, we're in California, so we know that a lot of Latino men will go, directly into community colleges, go to community college, but some of our colleagues have challenged us to kind of think beyond just California and Texas and Florida, and thinking about states in the Midwest or in the Far North region, and to kind of think about like these enrollment trends. They really do vary state by state. And then also just the more that Latino men perceive accessibility and approachability of faculty, or they feel that faculty care about them, the more likely they are to engage. So, which leads us to masculinity. So before we do that, y'all use poll everywhere? Yeah? Okay, you're gonna use technology today. All right, because we got time, because I'm just like, man, they give you 30 minutes? What are you gonna do for 30 minutes? Okay, so what you're gonna do is either if you have your laptops or your phones, you're going to type into your phone. What do you do on your phone?
This is what they got a text.
Oh, text.
233. You made yours really long. Marissa,
They generated it
Vasquez,
for me.
693.
They generated it. Okay, so this is all like confusing too. So when you open your text message and you're about to send a text, right, where it says recipient, so instead of typing in like your mom or your sister, you're gonna type in 22333. And then in the text, like the message that you send, you're gonna put my long little name with the 693 at the end. And the question that and then you'll get a notification that says, yeah, you're in. Once you do that, I want you to answer this question. So what comes to mind when you hear the word masculinity? You wanna play along? You're playing along now. Okay. I know there's always something that somebody will come up and it'll say Marissa Vasquez, 693, and then I know, Marissa Vasquez 693. Does anyone use Kahoot it in your classes? That's fun. Kahoot it. I learned it from like my K-12 colleagues. They use it a lot in their math classes. Anybody? Anybody yet? Still working on this?
Marissa, it says that you haven't opened the poll yet.
Oh, pues. No, that's not. Of course I did. Oh, well. I don't know how to do this. Oh, what is it? Oh, yeah, it is. Hold on. Technical difficulties. The professor doesn't know how to use tool everywhere. Did it work? It did. Lock this
I think
bolt.
right now it is not.
No, it's not locked. Unlock it. Lock it. All right, well, if this doesn't work in like 10 seconds, why don't we just shout out answers? No?
Just ask.
All right, let's just ask. Let's open it up. Fail. Are you recording this? Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
We have editors, don't worry.
Okay. All right, so let's just open it up. So what comes to mind when you hear the word masculinity? Anyway.
Toxic.
Toxic. Fragile?
Machismo.
Machismo?
Doing it on your own?
Doing it on your own, yes.
Like a wall?
A wall?
Yeah.
In what way?
Like, just a wall, like a filter that like you can use at any point in your life. Like, oh, I'm male, that means I'm right. Duh. Like that kind of concept.
Okay.
Defensive?
I guess, like, it's just like, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Oppression, okay.
Strength.
Strength,
Responsibility.
responsibility. Anyone else with it? Would you say that, Edenis?
My mom whispered something I won't repeat.
All right. Well, I think all the words that you all described are definitely what we see in the literature. You know, when it comes to masculinity in general and with Latino male masculinity. So one person, I think you mentioned, you said strength, right? So I think that even just that term itself challenges what we typically think about when we hear the word masculinity. This is really big. So in general, I think from the scholars who have looked at Latino masculinity in community colleges find that, typically machismo is what prevents students from asking for help. So what we mentioned earlier, so these men feel that, well, I've got to do this by all on my own. It's kind of like, excuse my language, but it's like, oh, if I don't do it, you're a little bitch. If you can't, come on, you got to do this for yourself. It makes you soft, it's feminine, right? So also Latino men having difficulty expressing emotions that would reveal vulnerability in their academic performance. So if I were to go to my professor and say, or even my friends in class, just acknowledging like, you know what, I don't know something. That in itself reveals kind of this feeling of just like, dang, I don't know everything, which challenges what's expected societally for Latino men, or just for men in general. But then there's this other concept that these scholars have also identified with, and it's come from previous literature, but this term caballerismo. Has anyone heard of this? Yeah? Adrian, what is caballerismo?
I don't know, but I've heard of it.
Okay, anyone else?
I know Tracy needs to be.
Yeah. The other audience, did you hear this?
I've heard of it too, but I don't.
Okay. No?
It's like caballero, really.
Yeah.
I think
To be chivalrous. Yeah, so it's a good thing. Yes. So sometimes it's put aside, like side by side to machismo, right? So instead of just like this notion of like prideful and I gotta do this all myself, there's also this like, you're a caballero, you are you're family centered, you're chivalrous, you're nurturing, right? And those are some of those other strengths that we typically don't look at or when we think about Latino masculinity. And so in general, scholars have agreed that masculinity is a socially constructed designation of expected gender roles, right? So this is what it's not, it's typically we learn how to play these certain gender roles in our families, in our communities, in schools. And when we've researched Latino masculinity, it's typically done through this cultural lens of machismo. But there's been different scholars who've challenged this idea, like there's, what really does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a Latino male? And Miranda and other folks have mentioned, there really is no one masculine mode of being. There's different ways to express masculinity, and sometimes these can be contradictory. So, for example, just as we mentioned in the previous slide, being strong but also being kind and caring. So, but at the same time, how does that challenge a student or a Latino male in terms of like navigating through the higher education system, asking for help? Is that okay? Can I do that? Can I go to my professors? So really the study, I think, well, again, this all kind of just came out in the last like few months when we were doing this data analysis, and when we were thinking about what all of this means. And so we started thinking about, okay, so there's been research that's been done on like men, like just socialized behaviors of men, but it lacks this cultural element to it, right? So there's O'Neill's male gender role conflict is a theory that we hear a lot, and so this is kind of just outlines these like different ways that men express their masculinity, but that's not necessarily done with like this intersection of race and cultural nuances. And so, this was kind of part of the purpose of our study. We really wanted to try to unpack this and look at what are the different ways that masculinity is expressed in different academic settings. And ultimately, if we know this, how can we better support students in community college? Okay, dang, it's still my turn? Okay, guiding frameworks. So we kind of use this constructivist grounded theory approach for our research. So we didn't go in with a particular theory in mind. We just looked at the data and we looked at what was emerging. And there were two frameworks that guided our analytical process. And so the first is Latino feminist masculinities. And so we kind of sat around thinking about what does it mean to be, like what does it mean to challenge masculinity? And how can we bring in this feminist perspective or Chicana feminism, which we really haven't fully unpacked yet, but we were drawn to. So Hurtado and Sinha, they have a book that came out in 2016. It's what is it? Redefining Machismo. I think it's called Redefining Machismo. It's a really great book. And so they've heard. I'll talk a little bit about what this is. They don't call it like a theory or framework. They just kind of put it in there. They propose this idea of this Latino feminist masculinities. And then something else that kept coming up was Yoso's community cultural wealth. In terms of the way that Latino men were expressing how they were navigating through their community college system or experiences. So this first one, Latino feminist masculinities, they argue that education really does help facilitate this awareness for Latino men and how they perceive power and how power can be redefined as it relates to race, ethnicity, gender, social class, sexuality. And so they argue that education is such a powerful tool that for Latino men, if you start becoming engaged in these conversations, you start really start analyzing your own privilege and recognizing, there's this, yes, I'm a man, but at the same time, somebody mentioned the word oppression. So we recognize that Latino men, there is a certain privilege that comes with being a man student, but at the same time, you're living within a system of I don't want to say white supremacy, but I mean just there's a dominant ideology in education in our systems that continue to perpetuate these negative ideas of masculinity for Latino men. And so this idea, this development of this Latino feminist consciousness challenges patriarchal and machismo ideologies, and also challenges these traditional perceptions of these socialized behaviors of identity. So sometimes I'm still processing all of this information for myself. So really, I think what comes to mind is okay, so if these Latino men are in college and they're being introduced to this idea of schools, not just a space for for being, it's not a feminized space, that they themselves can come in and express these non-traditional, socialized behaviors of what it means to be a man. So being able to ask for help, being able to see themselves as a breadwinner, but also challenge that themselves, and recognizing that education can be a pathway to, bettering their education, their home environment as well. So that kind of came to mind as we were looking at the data. The other thing that came to mind, or that kept coming up, was just again, community cultural wealth. And so I'm not going to explain all of this, but if you are not familiar with Yoso's community cultural wealth model, I would recommend that you check it out. But I think something that kept coming up was just these students were talking about the different forms of capital and assets that they were bringing with them to their experiences. And so, but at the same time, what we also recognized with Yoso's Yoso's framework is that it centers on Latino, Latina, we were kind of looking at it from, I feel like we were finding that there really wasn't this nuanced expression of gender within community cultural wealth. It's kind of just encompassing the experiences of students of color or Latino students in general. But then there were just different ways as we were reading the excerpts from the participants. It's yeah, that's capital, but the way that these men are thinking about it, they're thinking about it from their experiences as Latino men, from this gendered perspective. And that, it just became so complex, which is why I feel like this whole process and thinking of it is very complex for us right now. We're still kind of gathering our thoughts around it. But I think the question that came to mind was, in what ways does masculinity present itself as a form of capital, as demonstrated through their thoughts and behaviors among the participants that we interviewed? And so, yay! Okay, it's Fernando's turn. Okay. Ooh, and you have 3 minutes.
And I'm gonna go through my sections pretty quickly because we still have stuff to cover. So our data collection was done in the summer and fall of 2016, so not too long ago. We were at a large public four-year university in California. To recruit our participants, we reached out to the Office of the Registrar, and we had an IRB-approved recruitment email that was sent to all newly admitted self-identified Latino male transfer students. So they would get this email and they would have to reach out to us, and then we would start the communication and see what worked for them, schedule around their availability, and try to make it as easy as we could for them. The criteria was they had identified as a Latino male, and transferred from a community college and be enrolled as an undergraduate at the university. They were 90 to 120 minute semi-structured interviews that were audio recorded with their consent as well. And to incentivize it and to give them something for their time, we ended up giving them a $25 gift card. And looking at the participant demographics, the Latino heritage, the majority of them were Mexican at 23 out of 27, one Salvadorian, one half Mexican, half Colombian, one Mexican, half Guatemalan, and one individual who identified as half Mexican and half Salvadorian. I'm not going to go through all of these just because we don't have very much time, but the one I do want to focus on is the degree aspirations, and I think Adrian was also speaking to this. These students who had just transferred to the university, they don't want to just get their BA, they want to continue in their education and they want to be able to advance into these spaces that aren't historically and generally designed for these students. One little anecdote that I do want to give very quickly, when I first started working with Dr. Vasquez, she asked me when I was going to go and look into my PhD program and when I was going to get this degree, which terrified me, and I was like, no, like I'm just getting my master's, like this is why I'm here, and then I'm gonna get a job. And she's like, no, you're gonna get a PhD, like you're gonna get this doctorate.
Great.
And it was that matter-of-factedness that made it no longer this scary thing for me. It didn't seem like something I can't attain anymore. And something I'm really excited about. So Dr. Vasquez not only served as a mentor for myself, but also for my wife. And she had a very similar conversation with her, and my wife is now in her PhD program here at UCLA, the SSDE program. So I say all this to say that words are very powerful, and by being able to change the focus on this is something you can do and it is attainable is a very exciting and very affirming thing. So we recorded all the audio, we used Deduce, and then this was our process to go through it, and for the trustworthiness, we triangulated all of the stuff. And we'll get into the fight.
Finding in 11 seconds, we embrace a selfless commitment to Latino culture and family, forging healthy relationships with Latino men, and then we challenge traditional notions of machismo. These were some of the quotes from them, the Veronica Valentine, applications, discussion.
Well, hold on, let's go back.
Yeah.
We can skip discussion. I think it's good that it's important that we highlight some of these as it relates to not just Latino masculinity, but capital as a form of capital. So one of the forms of capital is familial capital, and so I think this quote was really powerful because he talks about that. Yes, this idea about I need to work, I need to take care of my family as a man, but at the same time, as he kind of went through this process of going to school, he says, I believe in this that a male needs to be done in the family, but it can be both ways. That we both need help in advancing our family. And then next slide. So this one was about, we talked about healthy relationships with different people. So recognize, I think this person talked about, he's talking about a friend that he had gone through high school, community college, and transferred at the same time with them, and just talked about how important it was that he had somebody that went along this process with him that he could talk to. And so I think this really kind of lends itself to that vulnerability of like emotions, and that was something that surprisingly a lot of these men kind of talked about, like it's okay to express your emotions, which challenges this like other idea that like you can't express your emotions of being a Latino male. So I thought that was really powerful. And then the last one, again, kind of going back to help seeking, that it's okay to ask for help. And okay, I guess we're done. So, but yeah,